This next guy barely needs an introduction, okay? We've heard of him or FeverBee for years, okay? But alas, allow me a moment to introduce Richard Millington, the founder of FeverBee, the author of Build Your Community. Over the last 13 years, Richard has helped over 300 organizations: Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, the World Bank. What? To use powerful psychology to build thriving communities. Through his Community Management Academy, he's also trained over 1,200 of the world's top community pros. Some of us in here, I'm sure. It is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker, our keynote speaker to wrap us up, Richard, on modern strategies for a new era, brought to us by Gainsight. Richard, my good man, the stage is yours.
Victoria, thank you so much. I appreciate the kind introduction, of course, and it's great to connect with you again. Hello, everyone. I hope you've had an incredible event. Like, the lineup for this event was amazing, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. I'm going to quickly share my screen and we'll go straight into things. And I'm just going to assume that you can see what I'm sharing. If not, just flag me and I'm sure we'll work it out. Okay, so hopefully everyone can now see my screen. If you can't, someone just interrupt me on the mic. So I want to begin back in 1996. I remember being 11 years old and being taken against my will in the back of my dad's car to chess club. And what happened was, a couple of weeks before this, I'd finished third in a local event, and everyone was saying, oh, you have to go to the chess club. Everyone thought I might be some prodigy at chess. And I really, really, really didn't want to go. But you know those experiences when you are dreading something and then you experience it and it turns out to be a lot better than what you thought? This isn't one of them at all. I got there and it was just as bad as what I thought it was going to be. It was held in a community center in the town that I grew up in. And as we walked inside, I just knew from the moment we walked inside that I didn't want to be here. The first thing I noticed was that it was all lined up in rows that looked like this. These organized rows of everyone sitting at their own board and playing chess. The second thing I noticed is that it was really, really loud, but also really quiet as well. And what I mean by that is that no one was speaking, but everyone was pushing the clock. All you could hear was move, clock, move, clock, move, clock. And the third thing I noticed is that I was the youngest person there by maybe around 20 years or so. And so my dad and I stood nervously to the side for a while. And eventually the organizer came up to us and he's like, hi. And we're like, hello, because you have to whisper, it's chess. And he takes us outside and my dad's like, hey, my son would like to play chess. And the organizer said, well, before he can do that, he has to register to become a member. And so that's what we did. We registered. I filled out all the information, or I think my dad filled out all the information. They sent off for a membership card. And when that comes back, I'm finally allowed to play chess. And the next week isn't much better. The way it works is that the organizer decides who's going to play who. So he writes down everyone's name, he assigns who's going to play who, and then you sit down and you play one round of chess. You wait for everyone else to finish, and then you play another round of chess. And the problem with this is that games of chess can take a couple of minutes, or they can take an hour or more. So that's a lot of time just standing there waiting around. And I remember this environment being so cold, so sterile, that I went a couple of times, and then I was just like, I'm done. I'm out of this. And I never went again. And I was thinking about this a couple of months ago. I was staying at my parents' house, and I decided to find out what happened to this chess club. And the only thing I could find was one snippet in a local newspaper. And it was announcing the closure of the club. And the organizer was saying, well, it's just impossible to run a chess club today. All kids want to do, and I quote, is listen to records, go on the internet, and watch TV. And to be honest, I felt really sad when I read that quote. I mean, it's sad when anyone tries to start a club and it doesn't take off and it doesn't work. But what also made me sad about this is that he is absolutely wrong. I don't know if you've noticed, but chess has never been more popular than what it is today. In London right now, there are chess events almost every night of the week. In fact, this is a great way to meet people. When I travel, I often go to a local chess event because I don't need to speak the same language as everyone. Chess is a universal language. And in fact, chess is so popular right now that you can even start a chess club by accident. This is James. Around 2 or 3 years ago, James did something really interesting. He took a chessboard out into the centre of London and just challenged random passers-by to play chess. Some people showed up, so he did it again. And then he did it the next week, the next week, and the next week. And gradually, it got bigger, it got bigger, it got bigger, it got bigger, and it got bigger. And right now, this is one of my favorite events to go to each week. And what makes it kind of remarkable is that in many ways, it's anarchy. And what I mean by that is there's no organization. People, they walk around and if there's a free board, they sit down and play. I don't even know the names of most of these players. I know their openings better than I know their names. There's no registration information. And some people play different variations of chess. Some people play different rules of chess. But there's a whole range of different people that attend. There's homeless people that attend, and also occasionally the UK's top chess player that drops on by. And it's a really, really fun event. And it keeps on growing and growing every single week. Now imagine if James at some point said, whoa, 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 wait a second, folks. I need you to all come inside of a community center so I can count how many of you there are and collect your information. Count how many games you're having and how many conversations you're having, and make sure your information is in our Salesforce database. No way would this chess club have worked. And I think the lesson from this, from both of these stories, is that it's really, really easy, despite all of our best intentions, to put our community in a cage, or to create these rules and structures and processes around a community, which in theory should work really, really well, but in practice are really bad for the community experience. And what I want to talk about today is how communities have changed. How do we really engage in communities today? I've been asking so many people over the last couple of years, how do you participate in a community? And the answers are so different from what most community professionals would actually say. A friend of mine is really into Space NK, the beauty brand. And she feels a part of that community. And when I ask her how she participates, well, she's a part of the loyalty card program they have. She occasionally responds and posts comments on their Facebook page. And when they host events in London, she might drop by. And that's it. Or another one of my friends is really into headsets and music and sound, and he feels as a part of the Bose community. But when I ask him how he engages, what's interesting is that he reads reviews, he'll write reviews, he'll sometimes create his own videos and his own reviews, and will follow some of the top influencers in that space. And that's pretty much it. Someone else I know is affected by cancer. And again, she feels that she has a community, but it's not a traditional kind of community, at least not how we think about it. To her, a community asks comments on Instagram pages of people going through the same situation as her. There's also blogs that she follows and again participates in the comments and gets to know these folks as well. Occasionally she might participate in a traditional online forum, but only if it comes out in search results. And we haven't even gotten close yet to Microsoft Excel and subreddits and third-party platforms that are out there. So Microsoft Excel right now has 632,000 spreadsheet warriors answering questions about Excel in their spare time. Or take Stack Overflow. AWS has 250,000 questions here that people are asking and answering all the time. And we see this again and again. In fact, I think one of the most telling examples is us. How do we, as community professionals, engage with each other? I would argue there isn't one central place we all go. In fact, when I look at how community professionals engage, it's scattered all over the place. There's some influencers that we follow, there are meetup groups that we attend, there's events that we attend, there's different Slack channels we might be a part of, podcasts we listen to. There's a whole range of different things taking place in different places. And this isn't just for us. We're seeing this again and again and again. And what I believe we're in right now, and why I'm so fascinated by the title of this event, is that I think we're in the community everywhere era now. I think we're in the community everywhere era. And what that means is that the needs are the same. We still have the same needs we've ever had, especially when it comes to engagement. We still have that need to belong. We still have that need to learn and explore. We still have that need to get support. And we still have that need to have influence. But the preferences have changed. The places where we go to satisfy these needs are different today from what they used to be. Very few of these things are new, but they are accelerating faster and faster. When we want belonging, we're far more likely to go to a dedicated peer group or a user group or events or group messaging apps. When we want to learn, we often turn to influencers or documentation or books or courses that exist. When we want support, yes, there might be hosted forums, but there's also AI bots and other channels that are emerging now. And when we want influence, there are MVP programs. We often try to build it on our social media accounts as well, or we host our own activities. And understanding this is so important if we're developing any kind of strategy today. Because the strategies which engaged audiences so well just 10 years ago don't work anywhere near as well today. A great example of this is Athleta. A couple of years ago, Athleta launched a community for women to talk about well-being and mental health. And when they launched this community, it was celebrated as a fantastic idea. It was featured in magazines and newspapers and different publications all around the world. CNBC and Adweek and many others were praising what a great idea this was. Almost everyone thought it was a great idea, except me. Not because I don't want this community to succeed. I want every community to succeed. But what we're seeing is that there are trends that are working against this kind of community from succeeding. And it wasn't a surprise when a couple of years later they announced they were closing the community after years of struggling to sustain any meaningful level of engagement. And in fact, they closed it down, possibly for the very things they should have been doing in the first place, which is looking where the audience actually is today and supporting those places where people prefer to satisfy those particular needs. And fundamentally today, preferences have changed. We don't go to MySpace anymore. Preferences have changed again. And this has big implications for the strategies and the efforts we're taking to engage our audiences. A great example of this is groups. Hosted subgroups, as best as we can tell, are dying. But what's interesting is when you look at them, they actually do appear to be quite successful. On the surface, if you look at these groups, they do appear to be having a good level of engagement and activity. But when we begin digging deeper into these, and we've done a study of this around 6 or 7 months ago, we found that less than 5% of hosted subgroups have any meaningful level of activity. And that's even accounting for the survivorship bias, not those that have already been closed. What tends to happen is people create a group and then an admin or leader will simply use that group to post updates of upcoming events and activities. And this happens so often today. In fact, we're even seeing groups like this, where yes, they have a group, but what they're doing is driving people to another group on a platform they don't control because they know that's more aligned with the current trends of what the audience actually wants. Even languages. Language is one of the most common reasons why people do create subgroups in a community. As best as we can tell, they're really not that active at all. And to understand why this is, we have to understand the nature of groups. Hosted subgroups, for the best part, are often just smaller versions of a forum. And that's problematic because groups are places that you go to chat. Forums are places where you go to have debates. What I mean by that, if I go to a WhatsApp group that I'm a part of, and I say, "Hey everyone, how's it going?" I'm going to get responses like, "It's going great, Rich. How are you doing?" If I post that same question in a forum, I'm going to get banned for wasting everyone's time. And that's the way it should work, because forums are for debates and groups are for chat. But it's interesting, groups are more popular than ever, but hosted subgroups are struggling. Another interesting thing is knowledge. How we share knowledge has fundamentally changed. It wasn't that long ago where we'd have these knowledge bases where we create their knowledge and we expect our members to share their best expertise and knowledge in a community in this kind of format. But today, these are increasingly relics of a bygone era. Because where do we go? If you want to share knowledge today, if you're an expert in something, where do you go to share your knowledge? For most of us, it's often a newsletter or a platform that we control. It's a place where we can build an audience and possibly have a chance that one of our posts might go viral on the platform. Or if it's a beginner level piece of advice that we want to share, then YouTube is fantastic for that. How to install a Ring doorbell, 148,000 views. That's incredible. And this is just one example. Or one of my favorites, how to tie a tie, 53 million views, and the quality isn't even that good. Or imagine if you are an expert in something complex like Salesforce SAP. Where would you go to share that advice? You can share it in a knowledge base where it'll quickly be buried and will disappear. Or you can create your own course. A course that might have 29,000 students paying £60. Think about that. That's 1.8 million pounds, more or less. So maybe $2.5 million. Even accounting for bulk purchases and Udemy's cut, this person is making over $1 million from this course. It's no wonder this is where people want to share their advice today. And what we need to know is that members are very much like water, which means they follow the path of least resistance. And we need to adapt to that. Because the more time we spend trying to fight this, the more time we spend trying to fight the natural preferences of our members, the trends that are taking place today, the more we're going to struggle. The more we're going to have examples of communities that don't achieve their goals and don't take flight, or that are clinging to a strategy that simply doesn't work today. More and more of our work today is helping companies adapt to the community everywhere era. And what's really exciting about this is that this is actually a fantastic opportunity. It's a fantastic opportunity to expand the nature of our work and the possibilities of our work. If we think about all the people that we touch as part of the community, for far too long, we focus on a couple of very specific areas, which I would argue is very much our superfans, the learners, and people seeking support. But we're not limited to these categories anymore. In fact, when we think about everyone we engage in, everyone that might feel a part of a community, suddenly a whole range of support opens up. And our mission, our goal perhaps, is to get people from towards that bottom right into that top left. And the more we can nudge people in that direction, the more successful we're going to be. And when we embrace this approach, an approach where we are gradually going down, taking people from engaged to more engaged, or from negative to more positive about a brand, the value that we can provide to our members and our organizations significantly increases. But first, we have to tackle the real problems we have to solve. What tends to happen very often is organizations will focus on issues that seem important, but really aren't. Very often it reminds me of the Titanic and rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Because really, if you are thinking about your gamification naming conventions at the moment, or whether to move platforms at the moment, these aren't the real problems you have to solve. That's not the iceberg that's going to sink you. That iceberg that's going to really cause harm to your community is where more people are turning to maybe AI bots to get their answers to their questions, or turning to influencers that you have no influence over, or just simply not using a community anymore because the technology and the functionality is outdated to what they expect. And so we have to focus on the real problems to begin with. And another thing we very much have to do is to kill a few sacred cows here. One of the things that I've been guilty of, and maybe some of you have been guilty of as well, it's practicing community isolationism. What I mean by that is spending so much time telling everyone else that they're not a community. Like your social media account, that's not a real community. Or your YouTube comments, that's not a real community. Or Facebook isn't a real community. And when we keep pushing people away, what we end up is a situation like this, where we're on a tiny island all by ourselves and we're missing the boat. And we have to reconsider how we define community and hopefully be a little bit more flexible with that definition. Take Lululemon. They say community is everything, but there's nowhere in this site where you can engage with other members. So is that a real community? Or take Nike. You can become a member of Nike, but you can't engage with other members of Nike. Or take Red Bull. They have all these places where they talk about a community, but on this page itself, there's no way you can really engage with a community. Even Patagonia doesn't really have a place where you can engage with other people in that community. So are these real communities? In fact, does that question even matter anymore? As to me, if people are still engaged in some capacity or they feel that sense of community, then I want to support them on their journey. And that's what I think the community everywhere era is all about. But there's a challenge here. And the challenge is this. All of this depends on the ecosystem that you're in. When we do strategy work with clients, one of the things we fundamentally have to get right is to align a strategy to the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is what's going on around that community. It's what's going on in the organization and what's going on in the audience. And then we also look at whether the community is successful or not. So your strategy, if your community is stable, if your ecosystem is stable, is very different from if it's beginning to change. And if it's successful, it's very different from what's not successful. So the first thing we have to do is to figure out what strategy we need. If you're in a stable ecosystem and your community is successful at the moment, then you can focus on optimizing what you're already doing. If you're successful, but your ecosystem is beginning to change, then you need to adapt and bring your community into alignment with the changes. This typically means changing the goals, the platforms, or the target audience. And if your ecosystem is stable and you're not successful at the moment, well, then your focus has to be to repair what's not working, figure out what the root cause is, and rectify that root cause. And finally, if you're not successful and your ecosystem is changing, then you have to revamp everything and start again. And in the past, a lot of our work was focusing on repairing and optimizing a community. But in the future, what we're going to see more and more of is the adapting approach, where we have to adapt what we're doing so we don't find ourselves left behind. And this raises a question, the question that comes up a lot. Does this mean I need to engage with everyone everywhere? Because you're so busy at the moment, where are you going to find the time and resources to do this? I don't think it does. I think it entirely depends on the ecosystem you're in. A while ago, I recorded some training videos, and I asked the filming crew, where do they go for advice? What communities do they participate in? And they said without fail, they participate in Sony Facebook groups. And what's interesting about these groups is that they are so active. Every product had its own Sony Facebook group ran by a customer, not by Sony themselves. And these groups are even far more active than the official Sony website itself. And so it really depends what ecosystem you're in. Sony is a huge organization, but if you're small, what should you do? So let's break this down into a framework that we can think about here. We've benchmarked the maturity level by a couple of things. One is the audience. The size of the audience has a huge impact on what kind of strategic approach that you can take. The bigger the audience, the more of these groups are beginning to emerge. Group leaders need an audience, like a fire needs fuel. And the less of that fuel there is, the less mature your community is going to be. You can't have that many um, influencers in a space that's relatively small. The second thing we look at is how connected are they to one another. My Sony film crew, for example, they do different filming jobs all the time. And even if Sony didn't exist, they would still be connecting and engaging with each other. That's very different from, say, an organization where customers will only know each other through something the brand hosts itself. So the level of connectedness is really important. Third is the types of engagement. Is this a place where people only need to ask questions and get answers? Or do they want to share links to relevant information, maybe job boards and event listings as well? Or maybe proactively share multimedia information and get feedback? And finally, does the community support an ecosystem? Does the community support consultants and developers and partners that are selling related services? Because this is one of the main reasons why people will do these kind of things and will lead different groups. And so, based on where your maturity is, you can find the right approach for you. Sony, for example, is very mature, has a very mature ecosystem. It's really big, it's really connected, multiple engagement types. And there's a whole ecosystem of people that sell services to this group. So based on where you're at, you can decide the right kind of strategy for you. Is it central Q&A? Is it an integrated community strategy? Is it the hub and spoke approach? Or is it a leader-led community strategy? And I'm going to quickly go through what each of these are and some of the implications of each of the approaches that we're talking about here. So approach one, hosted Q&A. This is where you're roughly in this kind of area here. You might be further along in one areas and less further along in others. A good example of this would be the AT&T online community. And as you can see, it's very simple. People come here, they ask a question, they get an answer, and then they leave. And typically, they don't come back unless there's another problem they want to solve. More and more, we're seeing Slack being used as well. But I think fundamentally, there's a platform question to answer here. Like in the past, people would use a forum for every use case of a community. If we break down a community into support, success, advocacy, user groups, and peer groups as well, there was a time not that long ago where forum would be the great option for all of these. And gradually that's rolled back, that's rolled back, that's rolled back as new tools and technologies and preferences are beginning to change. And fundamentally now, this is where forums really thrive. Most hosted brand communities today are dedicated to customer support. But this is going to become more challenging in the future. Persuading people to use community versus other channels is going to be a challenge. Motivating people to answer questions and resolving questions that people can't answer is going to be a challenge. And one of the big things, if this is your approach, is to make sure your community is offering unique value. We often think about where does a community fit in? As in, you've got a help center where people can go and get answers, and there's customer support channels. Why doesn't a customer just contact customer support instead? They're going to get personalized responses that's just for them. And I think where we see community is in this place of what we call the in-between questions, where there's niche and problems where the audience hasn't found an answer already or doesn't know what to search for. Customer support should primarily be for questions that are so difficult or require personal information to answer. But community is for those less common questions than a help center, but doesn't require that level of personal support. But now we have to think about AI bots because they're coming along and they're beginning to have an impact as well. And we've been looking at this a lot and trying to figure out how this works. And what we found is that generally, when people do ask questions, there's a couple of things they might need. One is they're trying to save time. These are the lazy questions, as we'll call it. They know that the answer exists, but they don't know where in the website to look to find it. Another type of question is where the answer they do have isn't working and they need a workaround. Perhaps it's a rare edge case. And then finally, there's questions where they need the best answer. And then those with requiring personal experience. And AI bots are great at finding answers that already exist. They're nowhere near as good today at situations where it's a rare edge case or they need a best answer or personal experience. We also have to think about where in the journey a community fits in, because there's many different places that you can go today. And what we're typically seeing, even today, is that this hasn't changed much. Only AI bots might be the beginning of the journey instead of further down the journey. And so when we think about the future of forms in an AI world, I don't think we should panic yet, but we should be concerned that if the community doesn't have a unique positioning, if it's not positioned well to offer something that people can't get from anywhere else, it could struggle. Approach number 2 is the integrated community approach. This is broadly when you're on this level here. Perhaps the best example of this is Alteryx today. And this is where you're integrating several features into one place. You have an academy, a discussion, a gallery, and featured articles all in one location. When it works well, it works really, really well. But there's often challenges with it. Often people create a lot of features that aren't that widely used. And as we've seen already, people are already turning to other channels to get help in certain kinds of ecosystems. Approach number 3 is the hub and spoke approach. This is where you have a centralized location, but then you engage in other places that your audience will also engage. But again, you don't have unlimited resources here. This is where you have to have a plan to figure out where you're going to engage and where not. We like to use a decision tree that looks a little bit like this. First is, does your audience engage on a platform? If not, then you probably don't need to be on it either. If they do, the second question is, can you offer unique value on that platform? If not, then you can monitor what's happening. But if you can, then you can ask, can we gain unique value? I mean, when we talk about offering unique value, just adding an extra voice to a conversation doesn't necessarily make it a better conversation. So next, can we gain unique value? Is saying you can offer that platform. And finally, is the platform rising or falling in popularity? If it is falling in popularity, then you just want to engage there and respond to what's happening. But if it's rising in popularity, then you want to proactively build an outpost here. There's this difference between engaging on YouTube in existing channels and creating your own. And so to figure this out, I would first recommend using a survey. Discover where your members need to go at the moment and ask questions that really figure out what their needs and desires are and where they go and why they go. And once you have data like this, it's a lot easier to figure out what platforms you need to be on and specifically what you need to offer on these platforms. And then you can figure out what is the unique value you're going to offer. Is it a verified source of information, exclusive information, unique expertise, or something that people can't get from anywhere else? And then what do you gain? There's no point in you being on that platform unless you gain something from it. Can you reach a unique audience? Or is there unique functionality you can use? Or would it simply improve the perception of your brand from being on it? And then make sure you're using the platform the right way. The wrong way is to take people from one platform into another. People have already decided what platform they want to be in. So based upon your community type, that's how we would decide what is the best way to use each of these platforms to achieve your goals. And then we've covered this already, but if it's rising in popularity, then you want to spend more time on it. If it's falling in popularity, then you might want to spend less time on it. And next, approach 4, the leader-led approach. I think this is the approach I'm most excited about, partly because it takes us back to our roots. This is where we're working with people that want to lead or do something interesting within that space. When we talk about leaders, we can usually break them down in some very specific types. They are partners or consultants, they're veterans of the organization, and occasionally they're senior X and VIPs. And so the first thing we try to do is always understand, what do they want? Once we have a very clear of what they want, then we can figure out how do we get them to lead the way that makes sense to us. And the key thing here is that we don't try to change their channel. If they're doing great on social media or on a personal website or have their own community, we don't try to get them engaged on a hosted platform. We simply try to help them do what they're already doing even better. So if they are creating videos on YouTube, we'll provide them resources and support to do that. But fundamentally, we want to help them do what they're already doing even better. So help leaders in the format that they prefer. If they're creating a course like we talked about before, we can promote this course, maybe arrange a discount deal with them. There's many things we can do to help people do what they're doing even better. It doesn't make sense to me that There's nowhere for most people to go. If I want to help a brand, there's nowhere for me to go to become a leader and get resources and information. One of the best examples of this is Miss Excel. Maybe someone can put the link to her in chat. Miss Excel is amazing. If you had come to me a couple of years ago on Microsoft and said, hey, I'm going to create videos of myself giving Excel tips while dancing around, I would have said that's a really, really bad idea. But Miss Excel is absolutely crushing it today, making millions of dollars a year from doing what she's doing, from selling courses and all these things as a result. This is very often these people, these leaders, they know better than you what the audience wants. So we want to be promoting these groups. A while back, Substack shared this thread of just Stu sharing best tactics to grow a newsletter on what worked and what didn't work. He didn't do that on Substack, but they're still promoting it anyway because they know it's going to help their audience. And so I think Wikipedia, or Wikimedia to be more precise, are a great example of this. There's a place on their website today that you can go to get advice and give information, to get involved, to plan an event, to contribute and find a local group. I think more organizations need to have a destination like this. And we also need to do a better job of supporting leaders. The more we can make the perceived rewards in terms of exposure, prestige, and influence, the more we can offer these things, the more leaders we're going to get, and also the less work then that we have to do. And finally, we also know a new era calls for a new way of measuring a community. One of the best arguments against this is that, oh, it's so hard to measure, your data is scattered across everywhere. And it's really hard to measure these things. We've done very many different analyses in the past, and we know the fundamental challenge is figuring out which of these things on the left influence which of these things on the right. For years, this is fundamentally what measuring the ROI of a community is about. Figuring out which things on this side influence which things on this side. But I think what's changing today is that more and more, it's the attitude that matters. Did the community change the attitude of the audience? Yes, you can still measure the ROI if you want to. It's going to become more difficult to do it. But more and more, we're seeing people want to measure the change in attitude. And there's two key questions we try to answer here, which is how many people did we reach? And what impact, to what extent did we change the attitude on the average person we did reach? And there are different ways of doing this. One thing you can do is measure the attitude when people join a community, and a year later, measure that same group again and compare it to people that didn't. And the difference in height between those two lines here, that's the impact of the community. Also, if you want, you can do a survey. Each year, do a survey and show how the results have changed year by year for when people join a community from those that have been in the community for a while. And you can see here that there's a range of different impacts. Other ways are to use a more simple score. You might look at share of voice, or maybe a simple member sentiment score. But what I'm really excited about, and what we've been working on over the last year to measure this, is a community-driven impact score. What we've essentially done is created a flexible system that you can deploy across any platform that you're engaging with today, and asking to what degree did the community or whatever you want to put in here influence or not influence any outcome you want. So in this example, to what degree did the community influence or not influence your decision to renew or cancel your subscription? This can be a poll, this can be a survey. And then just like the Net Promoter Score, what you're doing here is letting members tell you which thing matters and how much it influenced their decision. And there's many different ways you can do this. You can also do it on a 0 to 10 scale if you want a simpler scale to use, or if you want more complexity, you can compare it to other things that the brand is doing and see exactly how important the community is compared to these other things. Because imagine you can make a statement like this. 43% of our members said the community had a decisive impact on their decision to renew. Suddenly, investing more resources in your community activities is a no-brainer. And you can track the impact score over time. When you know the average score of each member, and you can multiply it by the number of visitors that reach the platform, then you have a score that you can track over a long period of time. So let's wrap some things up quick. So one, the way we engage in communities has changed. We can fight that. Like I know the temptation to fight against that. I recommend don't. It's a lot easier to embrace it. And then we need to select which needs are we going to satisfy of our audience, and then use the right platform to match, one that's aligned with current trends and what they prefer. Four, the more mature your ecosystem is, the less control that you will have. And you have to select the right approach for your maturity, your ecosystem's maturity level. There might be hosted Q&A, there might be the integrated approach, it might be the hub and spoke approach, or it might be the leader-led approach. But you've got so many great options here. But I think if we just abide by these principles in place, our communities are going to be successful, not just today, but for the long term as well. And to help you out, I'm releasing this book for free. So if you haven't got this copy already, you can use this link here or to scan the QR code. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening to me today. Thank you for watching as well. If you have any questions, I think now's the time to ask. Thank you so much. And Victoria, if you want to jump in here, just feel free to go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. We moved so fast I wasn't able to get that link. So I'm sure we'll add it to the chat in a moment. But yes, we do have someone here.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
why Richard gone?
How's it
Come on. Good to see you, Richard. Sorry for the interruption, but probably you will be key part of this one. So I said probably it's a good time to share the news. We have been done, like around 14 volunteers, these 2 days, and lots of work previously to run this summit online. People are really enjoying. We could really learn so much from you and all other speakers participating. That I said, let's do it real. Like we need something, like cool happening also on this side of the pond, as people say. And I thought maybe July 10 next year in London is a good start. So we are officially announcing Community Everywhere in-person summit in July 10 next year in London. Of course, the early bird ticket offer is already there. This is the place that we have selected. It's named Rich Mix. It's a nice place. We are expecting around 200, 250 attendees. The place is for 350, something like that. So we are good enough on space. Catering is included, so you can just go, learn, have fun, enjoy with your folks. But that's it. I just wanted to, of course, all UK volunteers are already part of the team. So we are really excited to share this with everyone attending today. Likely, we are going to bring Brian. Likely, we're going to bring a few more from the other side of the pond because, of course, we need them. But we are really happy to share this. That was my interruption. Apologize, Richard. It's not common,
No
I know.
worries. That's exciting. And congratulations. It's been so long since we had an event here in the UK.
Yeah, I think that worth the effort. Probably people will love it. So thank you so much, and I'm out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francisco. Wow. Surprise, surprise. None of us knew. So big mum's the word on that. Thank you, Richard, for such a fabulous, fabulous keynote. So much information, so much experience. Love the stories. Always love a good story. So we do have a few questions. The first two, I think, were people had maybe just quickly missed what you'd said. So if you could define a hosted subgroup.
Sure. It's on a lot of the larger platforms that are out there today where they have the main community. And then within that, there's a group within that. So they'll have what we call a subgroup that's partitioned off, but hosted on that platform itself. I can find some examples if you want to, or maybe someone can share some examples, or I can just use one. So SaaS.
Sure, we got time.
Yeah. So if you go to communities.sas.com, I can't see any of the comments, right? So maybe someone can share the link up.
But you could share your screen if you want to like walk us through it or something.
Yeah, let me see if I can just.
We still have about 10 minutes actually.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's no client data here. Cool. All right, let me share my screen. So what do I mean? So hopefully you can see my screen. I'll assume that's a yes. So you have a typical community here. And what you also find somewhere is that there's like separate subgroups within it. So say the user groups here. So it's on the same platform. But typically what you find is that there really isn't much engagement in these kinds of platforms. There's a little, like a couple of weeks, but there really isn't much activity there. So this is kind of what I mean. A lot of the platforms still have this. I personally don't think it's going to work or is viable for the long term. Hopefully that makes sense.
That makes sense. And thank you for the visual, because let's face it, we all need that. Thank you for walking us through that. Another one is, what was the name of the first approach with 0 to 10,000 member audience size?
Yeah, that's a hosted Q&A approach. That's where this is a very traditional ones like AT&T or those kind of brands are doing that.
Yeah. And then also, would you be willing to share a sneak peek about your workshop for premium ticket holders tomorrow? What shall the people expect? A light unzip, if you will?
It'll be like, that Willy Wonka film? It's going to be like that, but with data instead.
Great.
You'll never know what to expect.
Okay.
I might have hyped up a bit too much. Let me see if I can share something quickly about that. Because I was working on it.
Putting the final touches on. It is going to be interactive. Like, what are we in for?
So what I'm going to do is take people inside the black box of what data is, how to use it, and you don't need to be an expert in statistics for it. But we are going to guide you through the processes of what that looks like. So let's see if I can put my screen again. Hopefully you can see my screen. There's a whole journey that we're going to take people on, but we're going to get a good sense of where you're at the moment. You're going to learn how data really works, how to use it, how to collect it, what kind of metrics make sense, how to analyze the information, understand what kind of data that you actually need, understand like how to set good targets as well. We set targets that aren't achievable at all. So we're going to explain how to tackle that, how to solve mysteries and problems that come up in your community. But fundamentally, it's what I would say. Most people, and even if you can't participate at the moment, here's two questions to think about at the moment. Think of a metric that you measure today. Like, it can be any metric that you want, but just put it in your head now. If that metric rises or falls by 10% next month, what will you do differently? And I've asked this question at events, not all around the world, but in several places in the world. And almost no one can answer. No one has a system or a process for really figuring out like what that looks like, what they should do, and how to figure out what to do next. What's happening, and what's such a shame really, is that when people you collect data, that's all they do. They collect data, they put it in their reports to show their boss, and that's it. And that's such a tragic waste. We should be using data to optimize what we're doing, not just measure like what happened in the past.
Right.
Use data to improve everything that happens in the future.
Right.
And when we say that we're data driven, and as FeverBee, we do kind of brand ourselves around that, it's because we genuinely use data to improve a community. There's processes and systems. So we're going to tell you not just what's inside that black box of how you know if you've got a positive return on investment or not, but how to use that systematically to improve your community. So I hope that you can join.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Richard. We have one more question that just popped in, and we've got time. How do you consult in partnering with the marketing side of brands to balance both acquisition and retention.
That's an interest. So how do you consult and
How do you so let me reread it as well. It's a long question.
yeah.
So when we're thinking of the marketing side of brands, how might you partner in thinking about acquisition and engagement?
It's a challenging question because I don't think there's a set process for an
Right.
organization to do it. I think it's very different for every organization, and I don't want to say this is the right approach. I think the first thing I would do if I was a consultant in that situation, and this is going to be a surprise, is first spend time with the marketing department that we want to partner with, because you can never force something upon someone. I mean, you can, but it won't go well.
Yeah.
So we first try to understand what their goals are. What do they know about a community at the moment? Do they like it? Do they not like it? Are they interested? Are they not interested? And figure out what their baseline is. And then we figure out how to improve that. So we start making sure we're speaking in their language to begin with. We start introducing them to what a community can do to help them. We start asking them how they might want the community to help them achieve their goals. So it's always positioned as a benefit to them. And if we do that well, then that partnership should form well. Actually, the book I offered for free
Mhm.
should help you on that, actually. Let me see if I can copy and paste the link quick.
Yeah, and then I can actually bring that up to the larger chat as well. I did share the communities.sas.com link that you shared.
Cool. Let me just check that this link's worked. Someone said it didn't earlier. Oh, I could just send the actual link. There you go. So I actually wrote a lot about this in this book, how you can partner with different departments that are out there today to develop a successful online community.
Awesome. Richard, thank you so much. This was fabulous, robust, thorough, filled with expertise.
Thank you. I
People
appreciate
got
it.
all the notes. Oh my God, the notes. So people just loving you in the chat box. Make sure to go over there and regale in the love. But anyway, thank you for wrapping us up with such a beautiful keynote. Looking forward to seeing and working with you tomorrow. And with that, see you in the airwaves, my friend.
Thanks a lot.